When you hear about working in Japan, what comes to your mind? Probably terrible work culture, long hours, overworked employees. As people often say, like, Japan is an amazing place to visit, but I'd never want to work here or live here. You might picture those negative impressions. And yeah, I felt that too. I don't like the work culture here in general. But I came across a recent survey that says nearly half of full-time workers in Japan are now quiet quitting. I thought that was such an interesting shift, so I posted a reel about it on Instagram and it got quite a lot of views. So in today's episode, let's talk about quiet quitting in Japan and why I think it actually makes a lot of sense. So what exactly is quiet quitting? The concept originally went viral in the US in 2022, where people started pushing back against hustle culture by doing only what their job requires, sticking to their job description, working their contracted hours, and no longer taking on extra responsibilities. And over the past year, Japanese media finally started talking about it too. And according to a recent survey by one of the Japan's most famous job matching companies called Mynabi, about 44.5% of full-time workers in Japan are now quiet quitting, which is nearly half of the workforce. And honestly, I wasn't surprised at the number. In fact, when I thought about it more, it actually made a lot of sense, especially when you look at how Japanese companies are structured. So let me break it down into 3 reasons why quiet quitting fits so well in Japan. First, full-time employees in Japan are extremely protected by law. What I mean by that is once you're hired as a full-time worker, it's very difficult for a company to fire you, even if your performance drops or you stop delivering the results. So unlike in some other countries, people don't always feel the same pressure to constantly prove their values just to keep their job. Of course, many Japanese workers still push themselves, but that's often more about cultural expectation than legal necessity. Second, many companies still operate on a seniority-based system. In other words, the longer you've been at the company, the more you are rewarded. Your age and tenure matter more than your actual performance. So even if you go above and beyond, it doesn't necessarily lead to better pay or faster promotions. And third, evaluation criteria are often vague. Feedback can be unclear, promotions can feel political, and honestly, vagueness is something that shows up everywhere in Japan work culture. Even in job description in Japan, it's common for full-time employees to be hired not for a specific role, but as a general member of the company. So instead of being hired to do a job, you're like hired to belong. Your actual responsibilities might shift depending on your team, your manager, or even the season. And I guess that's very different from countries like the US, where your job description is clearly defined and often legally binding. In Japan, on the other hand, you are expected to pick up whatever needs to be done, even if it's technically not your job. So saying that's not in my job description isn't really a thing here. So when the job itself is vague and the evaluations are vague and your work hours are vague because of the things like minashi zangyo, which is fixed overtime pay, it's actually no wonder that more people are stepping back. Because if the system isn't designed to reward extra effort, why keep burning yourself out? And to be honest, that's exactly how I felt about a year ago. Back when I was still working full-time, I started quietly pulling back. Around that time, I was starting to realize that maybe the corporate path wasn't for me. I didn't hate my job, but something felt off. So instead of giving 120% of a system I didn't fully believe in, I began saving my energy for the side hustle. And that quiet shift is what eventually led me to start my own business. I do think more of us are starting to question the way we work. So I'm curious, have you ever found yourself quietly pulling back at work? And what do you think about this shift happening in Japan? Do you see it as something good? Let me know in the comment. I'd love to hear how you're thinking about work, burnout, and what freedom looks like to you. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. I share a new episode every Friday as I keep building a life that feels more like mine. So see you next Friday.